Hey guys, welcome back. So, this video is about seeing my grandmother on the other side. I know that a lot of times, when we lose someone that's really close to us, a lot of us wonder what happens or what has happened to them on the other side. Where did they go? What are they doing? Are they always around us? And different things like that. And this will be an attempt to answer some of those questions for you. And so, yeah, this particular out of body experience, it was maybe about a month or so ago. Well, or maybe a little less than that. I had already come to the determination that, about the whole source seed thing. But however, I was still in between really figuring out my sovereignty for the most part, but I was pretty much there. I ended up phasing into her house. And most of the time when I come out, I can actually feel myself being either pulled, sucked out, or not sucked out, but just or coming out. I can actually feel myself coming out of the body. And of course, if I have an entity that is good, the soul guides, they would drag me, that kind of stuff. This particular time, I noticed there was no guide. I just phased. I just woke up or became lucid in my grandmother's house. Now, I also had that veil over my face, so I knew then that in fact I was out of the body because usually I would have that veil over my face and I'd take the veil off and whatever. So I'll remove the veil and I look around and it is very dark in the house. Now, mind you, in my grandmother's house, it's wooden for the most part. We have wooden floors. There are, of course, the floorboards. There is the living room. When you first walk in, you walk into a kitchen and then you move straight into the dining room. There's a dining room that is to my, a dining table that is to my right. And then straight ahead from that is a wooden fixture where it kind of doubles as a storage area as well as just somewhat decorative. And then beyond that point, it kind of separates the dining room from the living room. Okay. There's a TV and whatnot in the living room, so on and so forth. But in between the kitchen and the dining room, if you look to the left, there is a doorway, like that leads to a bit of a hallway, and also it leads to my old room. I used to stay in that room. My grandmother used to stay in that room when she was younger as well, and a bathroom. So in this particular instance, I see the room that I used to stay in, and the door was closed. Now, mind you, everything is pretty much dark. But I see a light underneath the door. It's a yellowish kind of warmth kind of tone. So I knew, I was like, okay, well, somebody must be home. My grandmother must be here. That's the exact thought process. I open the door and I see my grandmother. And I say, Grandmama, is that you? You all right? Something to that effect. She turns around, and of course, it looks just like my grandmother, but the lady said, wait, let me go get her. So I'm thinking, let me go get her. What the hell? Okay, fine, go get her. So I'm just staying patient and whatnot. I'm getting ready to talk to my grandmother. Immediately, this entity that looked like my grandmother suddenly transforms into, I guess, herself. She was a black lady. She was kind of older. Looked like she was around the same age as my grandmother at the time, maybe in her 60s or so. And so my grandmother comes and she speaks through that entity. It's like a channeling type deal. I'm not sure what that was all about, but I just used that opportunity to just to check on her because I love my grandmother. That's who basically took care of me when I was young and up through high school. And so I was just kind of like, "Hey, grandmama, you doing all right?" And she answered. She was like, "Yeah, I'm okay." I'm okay. I'm doing all right. I noticed that that light in the room kind of kept things very quaint, very calm. It was like a warm hug, if you will. It was very disarming, I would say, but I've come to understand that that yellowish kind of light, like the one back there, it is something that is a frequency that is often used to help souls to be, I guess, to be more passive, if you will. It disarms you. It just makes you feel comfortable for the most part. So finally, me and my grandmother were talking, yada yada yada. Then all of a sudden, it kind of we got to that point to where you just don't know what to say after a certain point. It's just kind of like, you know how when you talk to somebody and y'all run out of things to talk about? And it was, so it has that awkward silence type deal. As a matter of fact, my great grandmother, we talked a couple times before she passed. That was my grandmother's mother. We had a conversation and we talked and talked and talked. And finally, she was like, yeah, we done ran out of talk. She was cute. But, anyways, so my grandmother, we stopped talking. And I'm just looking at her like, wow, just kind of scanning her like, this is my grandmother. I'm actually talking to her. And then all of a sudden, she says, and she does this. It feels like it feels like somebody's in my head. Like, and I said, what do you mean? She says, it feels like someone's in my head. And she's doing this. And so I'm thinking like, okay, what the heck is going on? Are you in distress? The feed eventually kind of cut because at that point I ended up going back to my body, left to wonder what the heck is going on. So naturally, I had to look up some of that, what was going on. Unlike what people honestly think happens after you pass, it's not heaven and the like all of that stuff. Now I know most of you probably realize that that's not, the heaven is just it's a construct ultimately. But specific heavens, especially for people that really do believe in the heaven and hell, they may experience a heaven, at least to some degree. But there comes a certain point where a decision would have to be made. Do you plan to come back to earth or move on? And they entice, I'm saying they, but it's like I'm going to call them the bureaucracy, the people that are over the matrix. And I've mentioned them before. They have a lot of tactics that they could use to try to get us to come back so that they can plug us back in, because we are generators, not just batteries. We are generators to them. With my grandmother, however, she was not into esoteric or new age, if you want to call it new age, but she was into just Christianity. She was a Christian. She was, very sweet, very kind, just very, she wasn't one of those judgmental ones. But regardless, she had no clue, or at least that from my understanding, I don't think she realized everything that's on the other side before she passed. So unfortunately, what it seems like is she may have gone towards the light. Okay. And in that case, well, then you end up in a situation where you're being channeled to speak to your loved ones when they come along. Now, from my understanding as well, what was the something in my head thing? I got two different answers. Of course, I'll check Gemini, but I also had to look up some other information. I'm told I was reading Robert Monroe, and he talks a little bit about, I think it's Focus 20 something 26, where there are areas where our loved ones are just they're in that area. It's kind of like a holding place to experience whatever they're going to experience, kind of ease them back into being the this a human again. And then I read too that because my frequency is was a lot different than the frequency of my grandmother, that entity had to act as a bridge to connect us. And the reason she dropped the facade, because I'll be honest, sh- I, I would never have known unless, of course, she maybe couldn't answer some of the questions. I don't know. But that entity apparently knew that I was who I was, and that maybe she could not just, act like my grandmother like that. And a lot of times you'll have these entities that may channel people through, and they may act as a bit of a protection for our loved ones as well, to not let just patch people through that don't really mean them any good. She probably did feel that I was a genuine person. I'm truly her grandson, and that she needed to go ahead and patch us through so that I could talk. But ultimately, I would have preferred to have just spoken to her. I don't understand why. I don't know why that was an issue, other than my grandmother may have made a decision to come back, and hence she was just in the process of getting herself together. And in that particular dimension, that was the only way I could get in contact with her. But being in her head, my frequency was just, I was too dense and the gravity just kind of made it feel, her talking to me after a while kind of made it a bit uncomfortable for her. Not so much in pain or anything like that. I had to try to figure out, well, what is it that I could do to make it not so hard for her, if it was hard to begin with. But ultimately, the only answer that I got was that maybe I need to just kind of look over, don't peer into her soul, essentially. Because I don't know. I just look. And I don't know that I am looking in any particular way. It's just that I look, and when I stare or whatever, it maybe makes some people feel some sort of way, whether good, whether bad, I don't know. But I'm understanding how this thing operates, and I'm going to share that with you. So it was great to hear and to see my grandmother again. It really, really was. Even though it wasn't, there was a channeler, somebody that channeled my grandmother so that I could talk to her. And I talked, we spoke, but the repercussions of that, she probably will end up coming back to Earth, unfortunately. And maybe, I mean, I'm just saying that for me. A lot of people, they have a journey to come back, and things that they do need to really learn. Obviously, if you have not been enlightened, or if you're unwilling to be enlightened of a lot of things, then coming back is definitely something that you may need to do so that you can figure things out. Even the prospect of coming back, well, once you've been enlightened, it's not like you can just come back to Earth and then you don't remember any of this. If the chances are you probably would be an enlightened soul at 3 years old, doing, being like a prodigy, a child prodigy, looking at people's auras and shit, you know, and being able to tell futures and stuff like that. But it's just, you know, it is a bit sad for me to know that, the situation she's in. I'm assuming at this point she is, because of that light. The light is calming. She's not in any pain, but she's, just kind of waiting around, living out, some time in like a resting type of area, if you will. So yeah, but that's, I didn't, not trying to come on here to bring anybody's spirits down, but this is all information, y'all. I'm not scared. I'm going to tell you what it is. And I know some people try to shy away from questions about death and what happens after death. A lot of people don't go far enough. So I will pose this question. What does happen after death? If you decide to not walk towards the light, where do you go? One of my subscribers, I believe she's a subscriber of mine, that was an excellent question that she posed. And so I plan to answer that question. Where do you go? Well, ultimately, all you need to do is just turn around. you'll see the universe, you'll see the construct, you'll see a lot of, it's not just a black void, because the light in and of itself isn't, it's a contraption ultimately. It's a machine. So you don't need to go towards the tunnel. When I saw my grandmother, I didn't see a tunnel. There was no tunnel. There was just me being patched through to my grandmother. Feel me? Just turn around, in short. And you can be sovereign, you can be free, you can create your own places, you can go, all's a lot that can be done without going towards light, y'all. But again, that's a whole topic for the next discussion. Understood? Great. All right, y'all. Until next time.